Hello, Chandler.
Hey, great to be here.
Great to be here with you as well. Thanks so much for chatting. How are you on this fine day?
Really good, really good. Action-packed day as always, but a great day.
Love it. So I'm just going to read your, official bio thing so you can stare off into the distance or do whatever you do when that happens so that folks know who you are and what you're up to. So Chandler was bitten by the entrepreneurial bug at an early age when he saw that he could make a lot more money working for himself. While his friends were off searching for jobs, he was out starting businesses. He began early, age 11, by selling his personal snacks at scout camp. And by age 17, he hired his friends to help him operate his landscaping business that earned him $10,000 for college. All in all, by age 20, he started and ran over $320,000 in businesses. During this time, he taught other college students to run their own successful businesses and received the Entrepreneur of the Year award from young entrepreneurs across America. Chandler now speaks to students across the country, teaching them the lessons he's learned as a young entrepreneur and encouraging them to take the entrepreneurial leap. Chandler is also a 5-time best-selling author and the founder of Self-Publishing School. So it is so awesome to talk, Chandler. Thanks again for being here.
All right. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start by kind of, hearing a little bit more of this story about, being college dropout to within 2 years building a 7-figure business, because I think that story sounds pretty crazy to anyone. And I bet it was actually pretty crazy. So can you kind of give us some flavor on what that looked like?
Yeah. So it involved a lot of failure, a lot of tripping and falling, and a lot of fun. I mean, the story kind of starts where I got tired of learning how to run a business from professors who had never ran a business, right? That didn't really make too much sense to me. And I'd come into class and they'd teach me all this stuff and they'd say, hey, this is really awesome. How are you using this in your business, right? And they would say, oh, well, I'm not, because I don't have a business. I'm just using this from some book I learned or from some class I took or from my PhD. So that didn't really make too much sense to me. I'm very much a learn by doing and a learn by results and not by theory, right? I hate theory. I like results. So that didn't make much sense. And I knew that I was learning a lot from Student Painters, which was an internship that I had at the time. And that was the first time I'd hit 6 figures. And then I was able to teach some other guys how to run their own business. And I said, you know what? Actually just didn't have confidence in myself. That's why I was staying in school. So I decided to drop out and actually give this thing a go. And once I decided to drop out and give it a go, then it was real, right? If I fail, it's like, all right, I'm failing big time. So I decided to drop out, and that's when the failure started to happen a lot more frequently. And that's when my bank account was like, one-way path to zero. But what I found, at least, is when you put that sort of pressure on yourself, you'll actually make something happen.
Wow. So when you kind of look back in terms of you making the decision to drop out, the timeline in terms of when you dropped out to when you realized, hey, you could really make a go out of it, how long was that?
So I decided to drop out in the spring, and I'm sorry, I got a little like leaf blower action going on in the background right now, which is just all kinds of fun, right? They only show up when you're recording, which is great.
Yeah, they know the schedule.
For me, I started, and I decided I wanted to drop out spring semester of college, right? So I was like, all right, I want to drop out. But then for me, I said, well, I've always wanted to study abroad, and that's one thing I'm not going to give up. So I'm going to study first. And then I'll drop out. It's kind of a cheap way to see Europe, I thought, and I really wanted to do that. So it was a time of introspection. So that's when I released my first book. The book took off, and it really kind of kept my head above water while I was in this whole transitionary phase. And then from that, I had a year of a lot of failure. And then I would say another 6 months until we really started cranking. And then within quick succession, like we're talking February of last year, all my bank accounts were negative. And
Nice.
that was the beginning of the turnaround. But then we ended up doing $1.32 million last year in business. And we've already done $1 million so far this year in a little over 4 months. And we're on pace to do 4 to 5 this year. So it's like, it really is one of those things where you have a ton of failure up front and it feels like it's not going to work out, and you feel like, hey, this was really stupid that I dropped out. All those people who told me that I should drop out or that I should not drop out, they're probably right. And maybe I'm just an idiot and I can't get this to work. And so then you go from that whole self-denial train to like, okay, this is actually working. And I'm kind of in the beginning stages of that, where it's like, you feel like it's like, all right, you look around and you're like, things are going well, but you still remember the times when they weren't going so well.
Yeah, yeah. So has failure, I mean, was this your first experience with failure in a way? Or have you been someone who's kind of dipped into failure at different times in your life, so you were kind of old friends with it?
Failure was somewhat of an old friend.
Okay.
But I think I protected myself from it a lot, and my parents protected me from it a lot. So I think there was this interesting situation that happened when it's like going through a lot of failure when life has been so good, that it was depressing, and like very, very depressing. And like 2014 was probably the toughest year of my life. Not even probably, was definitely the toughest year and most depressing year of my life. But from that came the biggest successes of my life. And it's like you're planting the seeds for these big successes, but in the short term, it doesn't feel like it.
So do you think it's interesting, because when people talk about kind of failure and luck and success, there's a lot of, there's sometimes a lot of judgment of people who get success quickly. And sometimes people think, or maybe success at a young age, right? Like you're, how old are you now, Chandler?
22.
Okay, right. So success at a young age.
23. I just turned 23 last week.
So I feel like there's this sense of kind of judgment sometimes of people who have gotten success at a young age, or maybe it's not really judgment, but sort of, people, oh, be cautious. You don't know where it's going now. I just saw a quote on Twitter today that a bunch of people were retweeting that was all about this idea that, shooting up fast and you'll shoot down even faster or something like that, right? So I'm very curious kind of how you've managed kind of the journey from, from having the negative bank account to then now being on this trajectory where you're not only successfully running your own business, you're successfully running a very successful business.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there really is this, a lot of times it's the whole tip of the iceberg, right? It's like, or I've heard it said another way, it takes 10 years to become an overnight success. And I think not a lot of people realize that, and they just see the success. The whole 90% of an iceberg is below the surface, and the part that causes the problem, or the part that people see, is the 10% above water. And I feel like people see that a lot of times, especially mostly just because of my age. They'll see me and they'll think, oh, young, he just had some lucky success. And also, he's probably entitled, and this will probably disappear quickly. And oh, by the way, he's got what's coming to him because he's a lucky punk kid that there's no way he's put in the amount of work that I've put in, which a lot of times, it's just outdated thinking, but people look at that and they see that. So but then you flip over to my point of view, and I'm like, finally some success. Like, I've seen nothing but failure for the last 2 years, and a 7-figure business doesn't seem that big of a deal to me, because I know what I'm capable of, and I know the work that I've put in, and I also know that I've yet to find anyone in my entire life that works harder than me, and I've always tried to look for people, and I can't find it, and that's not being cocky or arrogant. I've just never seen it. Like, people will say they work hard, and they'll have the Facebook posts and the Instagram and the tweets and the whatever is like hustling just every day, right? And then you go into their life, or in my case, you live with them, because I put together an entrepreneur house where there's all of us running online businesses. There's 5 of us in the house, and I put this together, and it's like you live and work side by side with people, and the guys in the house now, they're crushing it, right? But every now and then you get people and you're like, whoa, I thought you worked way harder than you did, but you actually don't, and you're actually super lazy. And I only learned that because I'm living with you. And so I feel like there's a lot of front, right? There's the Gary V's of the world who's like, hustle is king, and he's a really big hustler. I think he walks the talk, but then there's a lot of people who do that same thing, and yet there's nothing to back it up. So it's easy to look at that and think that it's more of an overnight success.
So, okay, let's go back to this idea of knowing what you're capable of, because you said you know what you're capable of. I think many entrepreneurs and even, employees who feel very empowered do not have any idea what they're capable of, right? So how did you learn to become aware of what you're capable of?
And that's a great question. It's one of those things where growing up for me, being humble was revered as this really big thing, and so I was always underconfident. I feel like based on my capabilities, because it's like, oh no. If I'm too confident, people will judge me. If I'm too rich, people will judge me. If I have my, it's like those things were equated as negative. Being confident, being wealthy, being all those things. It was like, yeah, those people, and it was kind of seen as a negative thing. So it took a lot for me to get over that, but. One of the books I've written, this is with my brother, we wrote a book called Breaking Out of a Broken System. And it's the 15 things our parents taught us growing up that we thought was pretty normal. But then we got out in the real world and realized that people don't get taught this stuff. And so it's his perspective as a really successful musician. He plays in the rock and roll band Need to Breathe. And it's his take on it from that point, and my take as a business guy on these 15 things, right? One of the things that we talk about in the book is many, M-A-N-Y, many, M-I-N-I, successes. So many successes, right? Say that 5 times fast. Okay. So basically a lot of small successes. A lot of small successes, right? Many, M-A-N-Y, many, M-I-N-I, successes. And so for me, what that looked like growing up was being in Scouts and then getting my Eagle Scout. It looked like, playing sports and then winning a trophy. It looked like, all these things that are small on the surface, but what happens every time you get a public recognition for your private work is you're like, I got this. Maybe I could try something else. And then Student Painters came along and it's like Entrepreneur of the Year, like #1 in the entire country. Whoa. I didn't know that I could do that. And then you start to see, and it's like, oh, publish your first book. Whoa. Another thing, I hate writing and I've gotten C's on all my papers ever. Like, whoa, how'd I do that? And so then you start, but it comes from putting yourself out there and getting outside of your comfort zone. And I think people starve themselves of that opportunity, so they never get that many success, right? And then when you start to stack those on top of each other, your confidence starts to rise and what you attempt is bigger. Like before, a 6-figure business sounded crazy. Yeah. Then 7 figures sounded crazy. Then it was 8 figures, and like none of those sound crazy to me anymore, because it's like, yeah, I've saw a little bit of success.
Wow. So now that, you've seen a little bit of success and you've got the 7-figure business, and so you don't think an 8-figure business sounds crazy anymore, how do you approach when success doesn't happen, right? How do you, and more importantly, how do you approach when success doesn't happen, but also how do you make sure that you're still trying things, right? Because it might be easy to just sort of get complacent, right? And to only do things that are going to work.
Yeah. So when success doesn't happen, I cry a lot. I'm just kidding. Now, when success doesn't happen, it's tough because I feel like most people, they don't allow for there to be a clear indicator that success isn't happening by not setting specific enough goals. Okay. So I think for most people, the problem is not that success isn't happening. It's that they don't know if success is happening or not because they haven't taken the time to make specific enough goals.
Wow.
So I think that in itself is letting yourself off the hook from having those results, right? So for me, it's like the success is just kind of, it's like a gas gauge or an odometer. It's like, okay, cool. I know that I'm either empty or full, but only because I've defined what empty and full looks like. Right. But if there's no gauge, then most people, it's like, oh, nope, there's no failure here. I'm just making progress. But it's like, no, when I make a goal, I'm making it's a SMART goal, right? Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. Like I'm bringing it down to a number. I'm bringing it down to something that's very, very specific, very measurable. And it's something that's like, wow, yes, I failed, or no, I didn't. So that would be the first part. Answer the first part of the question. When I don't hit it, I recalibrate and double down even harder. I'm very, very stubborn. So for me, that's a sign that a lot of times that I need to double down. But then to get to your other question, which was the complacency part of it, I have kind of a comfort meter. And anytime my comfort meter gets pretty comfortable, that's a sign that I need to shake things up. And it doesn't take much. So like right now, I've gotten comfortable. I've been in San Diego for about a year and 9 months. I'm living in an incredible house with awesome people. You know, we've got someone that like cooks all of our meals. Like, it's really cool, and it's dialed in and optimized to the max. But what I realize is that I'm comfortable. I'm the only 7-figure guy in the house. And so I'm not being challenged consistently on a consistent basis. And so when those things start to set in, most people, it's like, oh, cool, life is good, time to coast, right? But for me, it starts to give that red flag, which is like, woo, woo, getting too comfortable, right? And so I'm about to move to San Francisco.
What? Really?
Yeah, no joke. Because I need to be around 8-9-figure guys, and even just so let's zoom in on that specific situation. I look at San Diego. It's definitely, you know, I'm from the South. If you haven't heard it already, and so I didn't get that level of challenge there. Nothing wrong with the South. Nothing wrong with where I'm from. It's just like there weren't people thinking about the same things that I was thinking about and trying the same things that I was trying. So I moved, and then I moved to San Diego. But then even there, it's like San Diego I see as a city full of lifestyle entrepreneurs. San Francisco is a city full of world-changing entrepreneurs, right? Much bigger vision, much bigger goals. And like, I'll come up there with my few $1 million a year business, and it's going to be like, haha, who else can I talk to at this party, right? Like, not this guy. Let's talk to somebody else. And I love that because that challenges me to be better and to raise my game.
Okay, so we've got to talk about this house, because this idea of kind of living in community with peers and this sort of like mastermind, I don't know, mastermind space thing. I mean, there's all this cool stuff going on. So how did you come up with this idea to live in this house, and what the heck's going on there?
Yes. So the first thing that happened, so I mean, almost everyone's heard the Jim Rohn quote, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, right? So I figured, why not just live with 5 awesome people? Because then by default, you're already spending the most time with people that are really on top of their game. So there's 5 people that live in this house right now. And this all kind of started when I decided to drop out of school. So this is kind of the comfort. This goes back to the comfort meter and the avoiding complacency. So for me, I'm a big fan of the sink the ships, burn the bridges kind of thing. Okay. Like when, you know, you've heard the story of like the conquistador who they go to you know, it's like an island in Mexico or something back in the day, and they're going to take it over, and he sinks the ships and like burns the ships and is like, we're either going to take this or we're going to die trying. So that it's a little intense, I realize, not for everyone, but I found that combined with a high level of accountability has been the pressure cooker for my success. So just to take that down to ground level and to kind of circle back the long way to your question, is when I decided to drop out of school, I said, look, I'm not going to go back home, and I'm not going to stay in my college town. So if I fail at dropping out, like I'm going to fail at dropping out. Like I'm going to have to move back to South Carolina. I'm going to have to enroll back in school. Like it's going to be an embarrassing affair. So it's like, I'm going to sink the ships, burn the bridge. Like if I'm going to drop out, I'm going to drop out, and I'm going to do it. And I'm either hot or I'm cold, right? There's no lukewarm activity going on here. So it just so happened that a spot opened up in a buddy's house, which was kind of like an entrepreneur house. And it was up in Des Moines, Iowa.
Wow.
And so a guy by the name of Dane Maxwell, he used to run a company called The Foundation. I went up and moved in with him, and he was actually, I was learning from him through his course, The Foundation, and I lived with him and some other guys. And that was my first crack at it. And then I moved to San Diego, and I said, I want to put one of those together here. So I lived in an apartment with a buddy for a few months, and then I was like, I got to get back into an entrepreneur house. So basically what I did is I set up an application, and everyone that I talked to on the phone for a month or 2 months, maybe even 3 months. And then everyone I talked to on the phone, I'm like, hey, I'm putting together an entrepreneur house. Do you know anyone? It's in San Diego. Let me know. And then I sent it out on Facebook, and I'm like, just pushing it. And we got all these applications in. It shows the top people. We found a house. We put it together, and kind of like design your ideal lifestyle, right? So every single Monday night we have a mastermind. It's an hour and a half, 2 hours with the house. We're checking in on monthly goals. We're checking in on accomplishments. We're doing experience shares. We're doing like I need you to help me out with this. So like, could you imagine if like you defaulted into a mastermind, like literally you have to leave the house to not be in it, right? It's just at the house. Now there's whiteboards everywhere. We set monthly goals as a house. We do challenges. So it's not just about business, right? We have like last month it was Whole30. So we did Whole30, like this intense paleo diet for the month. The month before that, it was no work after 6 p.m., which for most people, not a challenge. For this house, it was like step into the room, like step away from the computer, time to finish working, right? So there's all these things. I mentioned that we have someone cook all of our meals besides breakfast. And just things like that like totally dial in so that when we're on, and when we're off, and we're spending our time on our highest leverage activity. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but.
No, I mean, I love this. I think the idea of, surrounding yourself with those people who can take you to the next level to the extent where you're actually living with them is just the coolest concept ever. And obviously there are, limits to what certain people how certain people can enjoy that if they have families and such, but it's such a cool idea in terms of kind of like leveling up to success. So can you tell us what you're really working on and focused on these days and where folks can find you?
Yeah, so 100% of my time, effort, and energy is towards self-publishing school. So that's the program that we run. We help people write, market, and publish their first book in 90 days. So it's kind of a fast-tracked program. It's the only gear that I know, and people see that as like ridiculous. But then they get into the program and they get their book finished and published in 90 days. So you can check it out, self-publishingschool.com. We're having a lot of fun and we're going like crazy. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for this, Chandler. This was super fun, and have a great day.
Thank you, Claire.